hard truth. None of it worked. The soldiers and airmen, the reservists, they didn't fail us. Their leadership did. Of course, former President George W. Bush believes Biden's decision to pull out of America's longest war is premature.
Is it a mistake, the withdrawal?
I think it is, yeah. Because I think the consequences are going to be unbelievably bad.
But it's also heartbreaking, he went on to say it's heartbreaking, not only because of the suffering we leave behind, but because we should have cut our losses there years ago. Instead, more Americans died with hundreds of billions of dollars flushed down the drain. So if these trends continue, it will have a terrible effect on military recruiting and funding. Credibility will continue to wane, and the Pentagon will have about the same competency ratings as, I don't know, right now, the CDC. So think about this. China's preparing to take our ally Taiwan down and is aggressively promoting economic influence around the globe. But what keeps our top military leaders up at night?
The job of the Department of Defense is to keep America safe from our enemies. But we can't do that if some of those enemies lie within our own ranks.
Biden's State Department is staffed by big thinkers who've downplayed China's brutal crackdown on human rights as they decry our own track record here in the U.S. They even invited the UN to come in and grade their anti-racism efforts. This is completely insane. But again, they're a bunch of self-loathing idiots. They're happiest when America is down on her knees, begging for approval and cooperation from Europe and others. Our intelligence agencies also risk running into the same credibility buzzsaw. Remember, Obama's Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, claimed that they weren't monitoring domestic communications, and we found out they were.
What I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
And now, of course, using COVID as a pretext, Biden's White House is using a backdoor to get into your text as well, text messages. Groups like the DN are planning to engage fact checkers and work with SMS carriers about what they decide is misinformation about the vaccine. Well, given the government's routine obfuscation on the monitoring of American citizens, it shouldn't be surprising that voters don't trust assurances made by intel or military chiefs today. Because if they're not using the pandemic to justify stripping you of your freedoms, they're going to lean on the events of January 6th.
Social media has become, in many ways, the key amplifier to domestic violent extremism, just as it has for malign foreign influence. The same things that attract people to it for good reasons are also capable of causing all kinds of harms that we're entrusted with trying to protect the American people against.
Who do we get to protect us from you, Christopher? He makes my skin crawl. Now, if Americans of a certain political bent start feeling unwelcome in their own country, if they're treated like potential domestic terrorists, why should they continue to support increasing the Pentagon or CIA's budgets every year? The fact that the U.S. military is teaching critical race theory at all is frankly all you need to know about how far leadership there has fallen.
On the issue of critical race theory, etc., I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it.
Glad he clarified that he was white. Does General Milley believe that before Joe Biden became president, the military was filled with raging KKK members? Was white rage a problem in the Army when Obama was president? And if so, why didn't Milley speak out about it back then? I don't think these generals and the intelligence bigwigs have really thought any of this through. Because once they abuse the public's trust, insult the public, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to rebuild that trust. Think about it this way. If evangelical Christians or other traditionalists just steer clear of military service because they don't want their sons or daughters to be subjected to left-wing hectoring or propaganda, or worse, just be labeled extremists because, I don't know, they don't support transgenderism or something? I mean, what then? What is the military going to do then? The reason conservatives have always respected the military is because they represented a certain American tradition. They didn't come across as political. But now the left has its claws into the military, just like they had their claws into institutions of higher learning, Hollywood, go down the line. So they want to turn our military just into, I don't know, another faculty lounge somewhere. Right now, we have a national defense apparatus, the Pentagon and intel agencies, that are spending inordinate time and resources on satisfying the wokesters on the left and too little on the real threats bearing down on the United States, mostly from China. Oh, and let's not forget that their ties to big tech and giant military contractors are a huge ongoing problem. More on that in a moment. All Republicans on the Hill need to demand that our military leadership and intel officials return to their proper roles and get out of politics. Do some soul searching, because you're doing a massive amount of damage to your really important institutions. And then what happens when America faces a serious challenge to our security? What happens when we need national unity to prevail? And that's the angle.